I've been around the world of film production for close to 35 years, but I never experienced anything that even came close to the adventure of making Candle in the Dark. You know, it took a full 12 years from first conception to final completion. Now, for most of those 12 years, I felt this was a film that just had to be made. But I have to admit to you, there were many times when I desperately prayed to God that I be allowed to just walk away and abandon this project. But every time I tried to bail out, somehow I was just pulled back in through circumstances that I had to come to see as probably providential. So let me tell you just a little about what led up to the making of this film. Recall now that William Carey went to India in 1792. So 1992 marked the 200th anniversary. In 1988, I was approached by a large university that had historical, religious, denominational ties, and they wanted to sponsor a film about William Carey for the anniversary. And because our company specialized in historical Christian subjects, we were given a contract to make the film. So we began to work on a script. However, before that was completed, the university, because of internal political problems, just arbitrarily decided to cancel the agreement. At that point, I assumed I was finished with the project, so when I heard that a company in England planned to make a movie on Carey's life, I very eagerly offered them our research, along with best wishes that they have a most successful project. But their hopes never materialized either, and once again it looked like this film was dead. However, we were surprised when a Carey anniversary celebration group was organized by some leaders in India. They were convinced that it was absolutely essential that a movie be made on Carey's life, and they were confident that funding was available to cover a fairly reasonable budget. This India group approached an Englishman by the name of Tony Tu and invited him to direct the film. Tony and I had worked together on previous historical productions, and he agreed he would direct the film if I would agree to serve as producer. I happily agreed. Looked now that after all these false starts, this project was finally coming together. The first few attempts to come up with a script were not happy ones. It's the case for any movie that if you don't get the right script, you don't end up with a good film. And at the same time, the funding was not coming together as easily or as quickly as had been expected. So we realized that this film really could not be done in time for the 1992 200th anniversary observance. But at the same time, we were all still optimistic that everything would work out. So late in 1992, Tony Tu and myself and a man named Esdras Giddy, a producer from Australia who had joined our team, the three of us went to India to begin location scouting and to interview potential actors and crew. On the train to Calcutta, I looked out the window, relaxed, and just marveled at how now, after 4 years of setbacks, delays, and cancellations, we finally were into pre-production to make a movie on the life of William Carey. When we arrived in Calcutta, we were greeted by the incessant noise and the congestion of that massive, noisy city. But we only had to go about 18 miles outside of Calcutta to discover the captivating and enchanting villages. And I have to tell you, what a thrill to quickly find authentic locations at some of the very places where Carey worked. Here they were, unchanged from his day almost 200 years earlier. Indeed, they were probably largely unchanged for over 2,000 years. The next step was to begin interviewing cast and crew to work on the production. But just as we began that, an unexpected catastrophe engulfed the entire land of India. On December 6, 1992, just as we were beginning our interviews, Hindu militants burned down a Muslim mosque at Ayodhya. Religious warfare broke out across the nation. Hundreds of people were killed. Then the death toll exceeded 1,000, then reached 2,000. To restore order, the government imposed martial law. We were warned that you could be shot on sight if you went out into the streets. Only military, police, and emergency vehicles were allowed. We were stranded. Look at this. Here is an extraordinary scene from our window at the Great Eastern Hotel on Old Great Courthouse Street in downtown Calcutta. This street is always jammed with vehicles and people, but now it was empty. The country and the delicate food transportation chain were literally shut down. And obviously the planning for this film came to an immediate screeching halt. We would have to come back and start all over. But that didn't happen right away because most of the expected sources of funding did not materialize. The sponsoring committee in India became discouraged, and they asked Tony Tu and myself if we would take over the project and do the fundraising. And we tried, unsuccessfully, for 2 more years in both England and America, and came to the point where we found ourselves discouraged. So we asked our Australian colleagues if they would take over the project. And after months of effort, they too concluded that it was not going to come together. So once again, I gave up on this film ever being made. But one day things changed, and that's when an energetic and visionary lawyer, Mr. Gordon Severance, came to me, and he almost shook me, demanding that I face the calling and obligation to make this film. You can learn more of Gordon's involvement because it's included in another section right here on this DVD. He worked sacrificially to help us with the funding. And then he went beyond that and agreed to serve as executive producer in India. This was vital because he was able to enlist some of his business clients there who gave us invaluable help. Some other sources for funding began to come to us from unexpected places. And then Samford University's Beeson Divinity School, based in Birmingham, Alabama, came into the project and really helped us reach the go position. Beeson Dean, Dr. Timothy George, author of the Carey biography Faithful Witness, provided much-needed script advice. And so we finally committed to go forward and make the film in 1997. But little did we realize that our problems really had only begun. Let me just mention a few. A big-name actor had agreed to play the part of Carey, but another film contract that he was involved with conflicted with our schedule, and we lost him close to the start of production. Fortunately, Richard Attlee was discovered, and he filled the role superbly. He also just happened to be the grandson of former British Prime Minister Clement Attlee, the man who presided over the transfer of independence from Britain to India a generation earlier. Having Richard there meant so very much to the people of India and provided us some indirect benefits for the production. Just before we were to begin shooting, malaria broke out at our base hotel, so last-minute arrangements had to be made under difficult circumstances to find suitable alternative lodging. Another major problem occurred in the banking system. We had sent production funds to India, and 1/3 of those funds got lost. We couldn't find them for weeks, thereby endangering the whole project. And government clearances proved to be a major hurdle. We simply couldn't understand what kept delaying the clearances we needed. But how could we have known? After all, the American CIA apparently didn't know that India was soon going to shock the world with nuclear testing. This was not a time that a little-known foreign film team would be welcomed into their country with cameras. And those were just a few of the kinds of problems that just kept coming at us one after another. On the other hand, we had one incredible advantage. The name William Carey is so revered and honored in the Bengali region of India, now over 200 years after his arrival, that we were able to tap into a vast reservoir of gratitude and goodwill on the part of the Indian people to his name. Over and over, we were provided help that we never expected, and it made all the difference. What a privilege it was for all of us involved to bring this story of William Carey to young people today. He's a true hero for any generation. Think a moment who William Carey was. The man was uneducated. He never even graduated from high school. He was as poor as the proverbial church mouse. He was an early failure. He was even rejected for ordination to the ministry because his candidating sermon was seen as so inadequate. His first 7 years in India he saw as a total failure. He was an outsider. When he went to India, the British East India Company actively opposed him, and he actually entered and lived there as an unwanted illegal alien. And he had to deal with overwhelming personal problems, such as the death of his children, the extreme illness of his wife, the betrayal of a friend that he deeply trusted, just to name a few. In spite of these and other problems, Carey persevered and by God's grace achieved what you will see in this film. Present-day Indian philosopher Vishal Mangalwadi gave this astounding assessment of Carey's impact. Mangalwadi said, "Buddha has more followers and Gandhi more admirers than William Carey, even though Carey has done more for the regeneration of the Indian subcontinent than any other individual in our entire history." So, was it worth the 12 years it took to finally get this film made? Without a doubt. And let me tell you just one reason why. When the movie was finished, I brought it to Mumbai, what used to be called Bombay, for the Indian premiere. Now, I expected to be told by the Indian people how we as outside filmmakers just didn't get it at certain points, and to have them point out the defects in the film. It was just the opposite. The Indian people loved this film. And here's why. They felt it was God's gift to the Christian believers in India at a very critical time. Because Christians were beginning to experience horrible persecution across that nation. In this film, there was a story that showed that Christianity and the gospel was not the enemy, as some were claiming, but, in words that were used to describe William Carey, it was the friend of India. And that's why this film is being made into so many of the Indian languages, some of which you can find right here on this DVD. Now, we obviously have no way of knowing how William Carey would regard this film that we made of his life, but I'm quite sure that he would be very pleased, the great linguist that he was, to see it being put into so many of the languages of the various peoples.